everyone, my name is Alicia and welcome to my channel. Today I will be going through my July wrap-up, where I will be discussing the books that I read or listened to in the month of July. Some of these books will be a little bit familiar, which are from my July TBR video up here. However, there are also some books outside of my TBR that I did listen to that I would love to discuss in this video. For the month of July, I have read or listened to 9 books. One of them was a physical book, 5 of them were audiobooks, 1 was an ebook, and I had 2 which I did immersive reading, which meant I was listening to the audiobook while either reading the physical book or an ebook. And out of the 9 books that I have read or listened to this month, one of them was a book subscription book. So the first books that I want to discuss in this video were from my July TBR. And the first one that I want to discuss is Game On by Navessa Allen. I listened to this as an audiobook, and the narrators for this audiobook were James Cassidy and Tara Langella. And this audiobook is 12 hours and 21 minutes long. The audiobook for this was absolutely fantastic. I highly suggest listening to the entire series as audiobooks. I find it's the most enjoyable way to listen to them. This book in particular, I thought each of the narrators did such an incredible job bringing the characters to life, and it made it so much more engaging and interesting to listen to. And it made the dynamics of both of our main characters so much more interesting, especially when it comes to the moments where there is a lot of fantastic banter between them. So in this book, we are following Tyler, who is the male main character, and Stella, who is the female main character. If you have read the previous books in the series, Tyler is the best friend of Josh from book 1, Lights Out. So we are following his story. With Tyler's backstory, it was just him and his mother, and they lived in poverty. And he found out much later in life that his father is actually very rich and one of the elite. So that is where his goal of creating these gambling dens, taking money from the rich to gain wealth himself, but also it was a way for him to slowly infiltrate the elites to get closer to his dad to exact his revenge on the way that both him and his mother have lived in poverty. And then we've got Stella, who is older than Tyler and also owns her own tattoo shop where she is a tattoo artist. And I thought that was actually really cool. So the way that Stella and Tyler meet was actually through Stella's younger brother, where he was able to go to one of these gambling dens. He gambled away so much money that he now owes a debt to Tyler. And Tyler basically went to Stella to collect the debt. And Stella puts her name in place where you let my brother off the hook, I will pay his debt. And one of the rules that they had was Tyler said Stella is going to allow him to infiltrate the elites, and the best way for them to be seen together is for them to be fake dating. Now, I'm a sucker for the fake dating trope, and the main reason for that is because our main characters always find themselves in very interesting situations, no matter what type of story it is. And I always find those situations, their reactions and how they try to overcome it very entertaining. Since Tyler is younger and Stella is older, they have a very interesting dynamic, and Tyler is very much an absolute brat. And over the course of this book, he finds that that is something he really loves to hone into. So can you kind of guess where the relationship dynamic is kind of going? So we have Stella, who is the more mature one, who is in charge. And then you've got Tyler, who actually is a little bit submissive and is very much a brat. So this dynamic was fantastic, not only in the banter, but also when they do get together and there are intimate situations. Now, overall, the story was very enjoyable. I did find the ending and the conclusion to some of the reveals to be a little bit underwhelming personally. I did wish that Tyler's arc of finding out a lot of truths about his parents and how it came to that situation where it was just him and his mother, a little bit underwhelming and anticlimactic, and I kind of wish that ended up slightly differently. Overall, I did give this book a 4 stars because I did thoroughly enjoy it and it was entertaining, and I'm so pleased to have finished a series. Now, the next book I want to talk about is Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. I borrowed this from my library as an audiobook. The audiobook is narrated by Kevin R. Free, and the audiobook is 3 hours and 21 minutes long. Now, this is the second book in the Murderbot Diaries, and I found this book so enjoyable, and I actually loved it even more than the first. I gave this audiobook 4 stars. Now, I don't typically like novellas. I actually found them very underwhelming. And each novella that I have actually read or listened to, I always gave very low ratings because I always wanted more. I didn't feel like there was enough there. But I feel like Murderbot Diaries is a bit of an exception because I think the sci-fi elements and how quick and fast paced and entertaining they were actually really good compared to some of the paranormal novellas or fantasy novellas that I have read or listened to. So I don't know if it's just maybe I only like sci-fi novellas or if the Murderbot Diaries just has something special that I really love. This audiobook immediately follows after the first one where we are following Murderbot's journey. Now, I'm not going to say too much because it does immediately follow after and I don't want to give spoilers, but all I'm going to say what I loved about this book so much was that we met a new robot or artificial intelligence type robot called Art. Now, when Murderbot and Art first meet, Murderbot is very apprehensive about Art, but then later on when they get to know each other a little bit better, they do have a kind of camaraderie, which I absolutely loved, and I found it so entertaining. I thought the banter between them was very interesting. I loved the back and forth that they had. I also really loved listening to Murderbot's inner thoughts about the whole situation. It definitely is very reminiscent and it's definitely something that you can connect to if you think about your everyday life when you meet new people and like the inner thoughts that you sometimes have. I think the most notable thing is seeing further growth of both Murderbot and Art and how they progressed and how their character develops over time throughout the course of this book. Now, it is a short 3-hour audiobook, but I feel like when you see those character developments and those little changes, it's so fascinating and interesting, especially because Murderbot is a robot. So it's very interesting to see something that was, man-made, but then going through the motions of all these human emotions, understanding itself a little bit more and how it interacts with other robots. And it was just very entertaining, and I'm really enjoying this series and I'm super excited to listen to the next one. The next book I want to talk about is How Does It Feel by Jeneane O'Riley, and this is book 1 in the Infatuated Fae series. This is a dark fantasy romance. Now, this book, I did not enjoy this book at all. I gave this book a 1 star and I don't plan on continuing the series, and that absolutely sucks because I own the most stunning edition of this book. And it makes me so sad that I had to give this a 1 star. So I will be trying to give this to someone else and give it a better home where someone who loves the series will enjoy this edition. Now, the reason why I didn't love this series is most of it was the writing. There were things that were constantly repeated that I did start to find very irritating. And a lot of that stemmed from the descriptions of the female main character, where she was constantly described as absolutely beautiful, a beautiful body, everyone wants her, she was the it girl, the pick-me person, and it was really irritating, and it was constantly repeated throughout this book that anytime when I would read that, I would just like roll my eyes at it. So that repetitiveness did kind of bring this down quite a lot. Now, the book does start off a little bit slow. Now, we do have this female character, what was her name? Sorry, I feel like I've kind of just like pushed this out of my brain because I didn't enjoy this. Just looking at my notes, her name was Kyla, and she is some sort of insect moth specialist, and in the town that she is staying at, these moths migrate to a specific area and she wants to study them essentially. Now, when we progress the plot and we have our female main character somehow gets transported to this Fae world where we meet Mendax, who is the male main character. I believe he is a prince or something in this Fae world. And their first meeting is absolutely brutal, I'm not going to lie. She was basically on the brink of death when they first meet each other. And honestly, when that happened, I was kind of like, oh, well, obviously it's enemies to lovers, right? So I was curious to see how they were eventually going to fall in love. And I have to say, it was really bad. Like, there was no character development or relationship development between either of these characters. It was like Mendax just one day flipped a switch and was suddenly in love with her. I actually had to backtrack a few chapters just to kind of make sure I read that correctly, because his absolute devotion and love for her really just came out of nowhere. and there was nothing leading up to it that gave any indication that he had feelings for her. So I feel like the romance between them was unbelievable. It wasn't something that you were invested in. And on top of that, the big ending, the twist ending that everyone was talking about in this book that shook everything, I have to say it was very underwhelming and I absolutely despised it. It was a big slap in the face to the reader, and it made everything that we had just read in the book make no sense whatsoever. Not only plot-wise, but character-wise as well. Now, I'm going to put a timestamp here if you want to skip this next part, because I am going to give some spoilers. So, you ready? I'm giving you 3, 2, 1. Okay. So, what happens is this woman here, the whole time she is being accused of being a spy and trying to infiltrate and try to kill the prince. And she's constantly saying, no, no, no. But the big twist at the end, it turns out she actually was. That was it. And basically, this whole story is from the female character's point of view. So we do have an unreliable narrator where we are following her actions, in her thoughts. We're seeing how she reacts to certain situations. And none of those things add up when we reveal that she was actually trying to do that the whole time. It made no sense whatsoever. And for me personally, I truly don't like the unreliable narrator type thing. I find it just a waste of time and honestly just very lazy writing. Like, you could have done something so much more different. Like, the story would have honestly been so much more interesting if we knew from the beginning this is what she was supposed to do, but then she fell in love with the prince and now she is debating or tackling her feelings because we know what her end goal is. But unfortunately now she is having second thoughts about it. And I feel like that story would have been so much more interesting. The dynamic would have been more interesting and her turmoil and character development would have been so much more interesting. But it just fell so flat where we were supposed to have this shock ending and we were just supposed to accept it. And I didn't like it at all. Now, if you did like this book, I am so glad you enjoyed it. This is personally just not my type of ending that I personally enjoy. And that's all I'm going to say about this book. Now, the next book I want to talk about is Coldwire by Chloe Gong. And this is the first book in the Strange Loom trilogy. This is a young adult sci-fi series. I really enjoyed this book. I gave this 4 stars. And to be honest, I kind of sat here for a while and I am trying to think what is the best way to even explain what this book is. So within the first 2 or 3 chapters of this book, I was a little bit confused because I did have to get used to the terminology and kind of getting my bearings with this world. Now in Coldwire, we have 2 worlds. We've got the virtual world, which is known as Upcountry, and we've got the real world, which is known as Downcountry. So once I understood that, then this book became a little bit more easier to understand. Now in the real world, known as Downcountry, this is very much sort of like dystopic in a way where it's not really inhabitable. So everyone uses the virtual world, known as Upcountry, to go about their daily business, where we have students who go to an academy, we have people who go to work. You can also use this virtual reality to meet your friends, go clubbing, like pretty much whatever you should be doing in the real world, you are doing that all in the virtual world. And it really does bring up some interesting conversations about the future of the world. Like, is this kind of what our reality would look like? Now, if you are a gamer, I feel like you'll find this very enjoyable because you have some concepts that you are a bit more familiar with. Where if you're playing a game, you have your avatar, you can create it however you want, you can get new outfits or skins for your character. And this is kind of has that same concept, except you can't really change your appearance too much because it's still supposed to represent you and there are restrictions. And we use this system called Strange Loom to enter into this virtual space, which is owned by one major corporation. And you can kind of see where this is going. We've got a little bit of government secrecy. We have one company who owns basically the world, where everyone is using their virtual network to plug in and do their daily tasks. So we all know if one company like has a monopoly on something, it doesn't exactly lead to something very great. A lot of bad things are actually happening, but no one's talking about it because it's all on the down low and it's very hush. Now, we do have a rebel group who is trying to combat this, and they're constantly saying their message that you need to unplug, because they will basically take you away. If you are uploaded to the network, they can easily shut you down and you will no longer be yourself. Is it actually happening? What's happening? And as the plot progresses, you start to find out a lot of very interesting things. Now, in this book, we follow two different perspectives. And what's really cool is as the story progresses, those two perspectives converge together. And when you find out like what happens when these two timelines converge, I was literally blown away. Like, I was shook, and I can't even explain why it was just so incredible. Like, the way that it was done, seeing a story from two different sides and then actually seeing the whole picture at the end was truly incredible. And I loved the way how Chloe Gong wrote that and took us on this journey. And when we got to this conclusion, it was just amazing. And honestly, I am so excited to continue on in this series. Like, I need the next book in this series and read it. The next book I want to talk about is The Mistake by Elle Kennedy, which is the second book in the Off-Campus series. And this is a contemporary romance in a college setting, and it does have hockey in it. Now, after completing this book, I have to say I didn't enjoy it as much as I did The Deal. This book, unfortunately, I did give 2 stars. I didn't find the storyline as interesting. I found both characters a little bit superficial, if I'm honest. I didn't connect with either of them, and I think that's probably my main issue. I didn't find either of them interesting or connect with them in any way, and I feel like that brought down my overall enjoyment of the book. Now, the male main character, his backstory was somewhat a little bit interesting, where his father is unfortunately an alcoholic. So I did like the parts where he did talk about his struggles with dealing with an alcoholic parent and the family dynamic in what it's like to look after someone with this type of illness. I honestly found a lot of his backstory so much more interesting than the romance between our two main characters. So our female main character, like, the only thing she really has going for her is that she is someone who is intelligent, and she is going into college, and she is still a virgin, so she wants to lose her virginity. And that's it. Like, very surface level. But what I will say is her best friend is a piece of work. I really don't like her best friend and how she treats her. So I guess the friendship dynamic between them was somewhat interesting, but honestly, I was just kind of like, I could care less. I don't know, like, everything in this book just felt so surface level to me, other than the male main character's backstory. Now, people who do love this series, majority of them have said that the second book is their least favorite book. So since I do have the same thoughts and feelings about it, I am still curious to continue the series and see how it goes. Now, the next 3 books that I want to talk about are all part of the same series, so I am going to talk about them all collectively. Now, this series is called Lost Light. There are 4 books in the series, and I managed to complete 3 of them. I listened to this all as audiobooks, and this was all narrated by the same person, which is Stacy Glemboski. So each of the books are called The Light We Lost, The Dark We See, The Hope We Keep. So I'm going to talk about these collectively. Now, what's really interesting about this book series is this is an apocalyptic survival type series. I love a good apocalyptic series, and especially when it comes to things about survival, I always found that very fascinating. Now, in this book, we are following a small town somewhere in America, and a geological phenomenon happens. And unfortunately, a lot of the technology is no longer usable. So that means people can't use phones, they can't use computers. And because a lot of our day and age, we use technology so much, now at this point in time, it is completely useless. When the incident happens, you see the initial confusion, terror, denial that tends to happen when something big happens. Now, in this series, we follow different types of perspectives, but the one that's kind of interesting, at least throughout this series for me, was this one woman where she has type 1 diabetes. When she doesn't have her medication, what kind of impact that would have, because if she doesn't get her medication to regulate herself, she unfortunately will no longer survive. And it was so crazy to see that because it's not something that you typically see. I did find her character just a little bit annoying at certain points. My favorite character in this entire series has been this 13-year-old girl called Shiloh. I absolutely love her. I think she's so spunky and she's so interesting, and I loved watching her character develop over the course of this series. What's also really interesting is how criminals thrive in this type of situation. Is we have a mystery crime story throughout the course of this series where we have a serial killer, and when you start to uncover more about this mystery, it really makes you question a lot of things and how do you really know people? And it's honestly that mystery aspect that kept me so engaged throughout the series. I would say overall it would be about a 3.5. And the last book I want to talk about is Dissection of a Murder by Jo Murray. I borrowed this from my library as an audiobook and as an ebook. This was narrated by Joanne Froggatt. I hope I pronounced that right, I'm so sorry. Now this is a legal thriller, and this is actually my first legal thriller that I've listened to. It's very much a court proceeding and how the events lead up to the trial. Now what made me pick up this book is I saw this everywhere. So when I saw that it was very popular, everyone seems to be loving it, I decided to put in a hold with my library, and it was quite the wait. So this being my first legal thriller, I wasn't actually sure what to expect, but I actually thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the legal proceedings. Now this is based in the UK, so obviously I am not familiar with their legal system. And what I did like about the book is it does explain to you what the legal system is, what certain things are, and I quite like that they did give that introduction and quite a few of the differences, so you can actually understand the story a little bit better. Now, in this book, we are following a woman who has never done a criminal murder type case before, and it is about the death of a judge. So definitely very high stakes, where this case could literally make or break her career. And to top off a lot of the extra stress that this poor woman has to go through, the person who is prosecuting is her husband, and she is defending the criminal. Now that is a very crazy dynamic. I can only imagine what type of relationship strain that we will see throughout the course of the book, and you do, because there are instances within the courtroom where her husband does put her down and make her seem incompetent, and that is so crazy. Like, I really don't know how you would be able to separate, you know, your home life with your work life, especially in this type of setting, and then at home pretending like everything's normal. Like, I would have some issues with that personally, you know? So, and you do see a lot of the struggle that she does have with this, which definitely makes sense, you know? So I do love the dramatics of that and the tension between them and how this does affect their marriage. Go throughout the process of this book, everyone just seems so suspicious. Like, you're thinking, oh, that person's a bit sus, that's a little bit sus, and you try and piece the things together yourself. And I love that about these types of books. I like to put my little detective hat on myself and try and figure things out. I was right in a couple of instances, which I was very proud of. But there were also a lot of things that I was completely wrong about that did shock me. Now, while I loved the first 85% of this book, I was leaning towards a 4-star or a 4.5 star. However, unfortunately, the ending left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth, where unfortunately I had to drop down the rating to a 3-star. And to be honest, I still don't know how I feel about the ending. I have mixed feelings about it. There were some things where I'm like, I don't know. If you are someone who is on the jury and you are presented with all the evidence from both sides, what side to you is more believable? You know, do you find the person guilty or not guilty? Yeah, that's kind of my feelings on the book. I'm really curious to see if you have read this book, what are your thoughts on it? Because yeah, like I said, I'm very conflicted about it. And that comes to the end of this video for my July wrap up. Please let me know in the comments down below if you have read or listened to any of these books, and let me know your thoughts down below if you had similar feelings to me or if you had different opinions. I'm really curious to see what your thoughts are and have a very good discussion in the comments down below. Please also give this video a like and be sure to subscribe so you can be notified of more content like this. Until the next time, bye!